All right, not to take up too much of everyone's time. Good evening, everyone. My name is Clarissa Kusel. I am the co-founder of SeaBlue Collective. We are an ocean-friendly marketplace. We are so excited to be joined by Saloni Doshi. She is the CEO of EcoEnclose. It's a sustainable packaging company. As we work one-on-one and closely with small business owners, sustainable packaging is a question we get all the time, and we actually reference a lot of the blog posts on EcoEnclose to our vendors. So it's been a long time coming to actually bring Saloni to this group of individuals, and we're so excited for the knowledge that she is going to impart on us. So the way this evening is going to work, we are going to have a quick presentation, and then we'll open it up to questions. We encourage questions from the audience as well as those who are joined in video. Those are all SeaBlue Collective vendors. Just make sure to raise your hand or just drop them in the chat box. All right, and that is it with me introducing Saloni. Off to you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I've been reading more about SeaBlue Collective and the vendors and the merchant you guys have, and you guys are really inspiring. So it's a privilege to be able to talk with you guys. As Clarissa mentioned, I'm the CEO of EcoEnclose. I've been running EcoEnclose for about 5.5 years. And in that time, we've worked with like over 50,000 different e-commerce companies, and everybody ranging from like a small Etsy shop that maybe does a couple orders a month to a large Fortune 500 brand that might shift from like brick and mortar to e-commerce. So we really are set up to, and we love helping companies of all sizes. So, I think this is probably not even a slide that's needed for this audience, but I do like to talk about like, why is sustainability so important in the world of e-commerce packaging? And, I see this question in two ways. The first is like, it's an opportunity. You think about like sending something to your customer, and this, you read this all the time. It's like your first touch point to the customer that's physical, and the opportunity for you to showcase who you are and what you stand for in that moment is just a huge win. And I think customers are more and more frustrated than they ever have been before about like, what do they do with all this waste on their doorstep? And so the idea of turning that into like a productive and environmentally conscious experience, again, is a huge opportunity. I think it's also just a tremendous environmental tragedy. Packaging is a big source of waste. An average American makes 6 pounds of waste a day, of which over a quarter is just packaging. So something that's like designed to just be used once. And then 50% of that today gets landfilled. And in the landfill, it basically like it's a waste away. All of those resources sort of waste away in the landfill. And as something like a paper bag decomposes in the landfill, it's leaking methane into the environment. It's leaching out toxins into the groundwater. And to me, that's both an environmental problem that's global, but also like a really localized environmental justice issue. If you read about the communities around a landfill, they're oftentimes low-income communities of color, and they experience like significantly higher rates of certain cancers, and lower birth weights and higher rates of birth defects. And so, just in the world of environmental justice, like, we've got to do something about that. And one part a company can play is to just try to get less waste to go to the landfill. This particular audience, I don't talk as much about oceans and waterways, but I did want to sort of touch on three of the issues that packaging can affect as it relates to our oceans and waterways. I'm going to touch back on these concepts throughout the presentation, so I'm just raising them here. I'm sure you guys are sort of deep in these issues on the daily already, but eutrophication, and I personally come from a background of sustainable agriculture, so the idea of like nitrogen and phosphorus runoff into our soils and waters and what it's doing to our, I think I've read that 65% of our oceans in the US, our coastal waters in the US, have degrading rates of nutrient pollution. And so it's an issue that's actually very dear to my heart. The second issue of plastic pollution, which I think is in some ways like the sort of visceral issue of our time and of our generation, and how much we're reading about like the garbage patches in the ocean, and what, I know a lot of businesses are like, what can I do to create a business that doesn't contribute in any way to plastic pollution? And then the third is the ocean acidification. So as carbon emissions are getting released into the atmosphere at such high rates, 30% of that is actually getting absorbed into the ocean, lowering the pH levels and having really tragic consequences on sea life in many different ways. So these are three issues that in different ways, different packaging decisions you make could or may not impact these three issues. So I'll come back to these time and again. So what is sustainable packaging? There's a chance that when I say the word sustainable packaging, you have like something really specific in your mind, maybe like something you got in the mail or an Instagram ad that you've seen. And I like to start by saying, like, there is no one way to do sustainable packaging. And I show this slide to say, to me, these are all companies that have made a really conscious effort to elevate the ecological game, I would say, of their packaging. And they really come at it in different ways. So you've got like a box, you've got mailers, you've got paper, you've got plastic. And I think all of these companies have done a really conscious and beautiful job trying to create a packaging strategy that aligns with their brand and meets their definition of sustainability. That said, I also really don't want anybody to come away being like, oh, any packaging can be sustainable. To be sustainable, you really do have to make an effort to do something. And it's not enough to just like slap sustainable or recyclable on your package. So over the next couple slides, I'm going to talk about how we at EcoEnclose define sustainability and how we work with our customers on that. You may decide that that's the right way to define sustainability for you, or you may read those slides and say, okay, I'm ready to now come away and create my own framework for sustainability that really represents my company. So whichever one you decide is totally fine, but hopefully these slides give you a little bit of a start. So this slide is like the crux of EcoEnclose's vision and framework for sustainability. And our vision sort of long-term, as I think about what could the future of the packaging look like, is this idea of material circularity. So this notion that a consumer like gets their package, maybe they reuse it a couple times and then they recycle it. And then, maybe it goes to a single stream or a mixed use recycling, like a materials recovery facility. And when it goes to that facility, that facility then sorts it into these like materials. So let's say, a bale of aluminum, a bale of corrugate, et cetera. And then the MRF is trying to sell that to a reclaimer. So let's take that bale of corrugate, and it's going to get sold to the reclaimer or the paper mill. The paper mill pulps it down, cleans it out, takes the staples out, de-inks it, and then rolls it out and, manufactures a big sheet of paper, big rolls of paper that gets sold to the converter. Converter makes packaging out of it that gets sold to brands like yourself, back to the consumer. And hopefully, like my dream vision is that you get this world where packaging is like literally just going round and round in this virtuous cycle. And so that's the vision. It's sort of this clean vision, right? Where you have very little need for virgin inputs. You got very little that gets kicked out into the landfill. And we are very, very far from this vision today. But as I think about for EcoEnclose and the brands we work with, like what can you do today to build towards this? There are two questions to ask. The first is, how much recycled content can I get into my packaging? And in particular, how much post-consumer waste can I get into my packaging? And then how can I make my packaging as readily recyclable as possible? And I think most people can wrap their head around the recyclable part. I'm just going to say one more minute on the post-consumer waste. And the reason that we are so maniacally focused on post-consumer waste as it relates to the circularity is this idea that as brands and consumers invest and demand post-consumer waste, every other like entity on this supply chain gets motivated and incentivized to invest in the equipment and the capacity to work with post-consumer waste, which is harder and more expensive to work with as it stands. So you start to see, as people demand post-consumer waste, the ability to make investments across this entire supply chain that allow for the entire cycle to work with more post-consumer waste. So if right now we're at a 32% recycling rate, maybe with all of these investments and the demand on this part of the circle, you start to create capacity here that just moves more and more recycled content through the cycle. So that's what we can do. Those two questions: recycled content, post-consumer waste, and recyclable. That's the heart of what we're really all about. There are some other things we do focus on very regularly as we think about our packaging. The first is assessing and making efforts to ensure that we're keeping carbon emissions reasonable and low. The other is regenerative. So there are instances where we haven't been able to create like something with high recycled content. And in those places, we look for source material that's regenerative. So an example of that is that we have this glassine bag. It's an alternative to a poly bag. And unfortunately, because it's super calendared paper, we haven't been able to get it made with recycled content yet. And so for that particular product, we looked for an FSC certified paper stock because that is a representation of a more regenerative and sustainable way to grow virgin materials. We also look a lot at our supply chain. So how ethically are they treating their own workforce? How well documented are the things that they're telling us are true about the source material? Where are they located, and what are the ethical and ecological standards they hold themselves accountable to? And then the last thing is that we really do focus a lot on like what we call the little things. So an example of that is you might have two packages. One is 100% recycled, 90% post-consumer, the other exactly the same. But as you go a little further, you find one of them has, more ecological inks, more ecological adhesives, maybe features that allow for reuse. And so those are the little things that set one apart from the other, and we don't want to discount them and discard them. We focus a lot on trying to invest in those. So I'm going to just do a quick thing in case you guys sort of leave here and you're like, EcoEnclose's framework isn't right for me, but I want to create my own. I find it really hard to wrap my head around all of the different environmental challenges there are today. It's like, do you focus on plastic pollution or do you focus on nitrogen runoff? And it's just like, how do you make that decision? This is just, it's like a little nod to this thing called the 9 Planetary Boundaries, which you may or may not have heard of before, but it's like a way to, it sort of groups together all of the environmental challenges in these 9 groups, and then has this stated, like, here's the quantitative threshold that we can't get above. So climate change is up here, and it's like, we can't go above X parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. And then it sort of paints a picture of where are we today in relation to that threshold. I just have found this to really help me understand, okay, how do I decide between one thing or the other, one bad versus another bad? So you guys might find equally helpful to sort of immerse yourself a little bit in this if you want to come away from this thinking about your own framework for sustainability. So I'm going to take a couple slides just talking about some of the most complicated questions that we get, just to give you our answers, which may or may not work for you, but I think it's just helpful to talk through these. The first question is paper or plastic. Probably the most popular question we get is, do I go with the paper mailer or do I go with the plastic mailer? Because EcoEnclose is really focused on circularity, our answer is that paper is the winner when it comes to circularity. You can make it more readily with high levels of recycled content and post-consumer waste, and it's much more readily recyclable. You can curbside recycle paper in almost every municipality in the country. And plastic film, as many of you know, has to be dropped off at a grocery thin film bin, so it's a lot harder to recycle. So if you, like us, sort of say circularity is the #1 thing, paper is going to have that edge. That said, we do have a plastic line, and it's 100% recycled plastic line. And the reason is for a couple of reasons. One is, if you think about carbon emissions, plastic actually has a lower carbon footprint than paper. Studies have been shown that an equivalent paper versus plastic, you actually have to use the paper alternative 3 times to match the carbon footprint of the plastic alternative. So if you've designed your whole packaging on carbon, you might say, okay, 100% recycled plastic is better for my business. Additionally, plastic, it's lower cost, it's incredibly functional, right? It's waterproof, it's flexible, it's really durable. It's like so much less, takes up so much less room if you're space constrained as a business. So there's a lot of functional benefits to plastic. And then we also at EcoEnclose have made investments in plastic because it's actually the part of that like circular material circularity that needs the most amount of commitment to post-consumer waste to start driving some of that innovation. So we've actually seen that as we focus on like, hey, we need more post-consumer waste, we've seen the supply chain behind us say, okay, we'll try it. And now we've sort of gotten to much higher levels of post-consumer waste in our plastic line. So paper is like a winner, but I think there's some solid reasons to go with plastic, and you can create something you can be confident around in the plastic world as well. Another question we talk about a lot and we grapple with a lot is recycled or bio-based plastic. Again, for us, high recycled content will win over bio-based plastic. And that's true today for a lot of reasons. The main is that bio-based plastic is 100% virgin today. And today's like options when it comes to bioplastic is largely PLA. If you think about mailing, like mailers, and PLA is made with corn. And again, I sort of talked a lot about my obsession with soil. And I know a lot of folks in the audience are probably really focused on, again, ocean health and minimizing the phosphorus and nitrogen runoff. And corn is like one of the most degenerative crops that we grow. And I've read a lot about how we've sort of replaced fossil fuels with ethanol over the last 3 decades. And research after research has shown that that migration of trying to move fossil fuels to ethanol has actually had a net negative impact on our planet. We've converted so much land to corn use that has released so much carbon emissions into the atmosphere, and then released, so many nutrients into our oceans. So we just know corn isn't a great replacement for fossil fuels. But I do want to say that I think the future of bioplastics is bright. There's a lot of really interesting innovations happening with like kelp and seaweed as feedstock, or biomass waste, and even cellulose from trees being now more and more economically feasible. So there is a world I see where bioplastic is really interesting. I just don't think commercially we're there today. And then the last one is this idea of like designing to recycle or designing to compost. It's probably not going to surprise you to say that I think recyclability is where it's at. Again, this sort of focus on circularity. I do want to say a couple words on compostability. It's called the hierarchy of waste, is this triangle that you see here. It was developed by the Sustainable Packaging Coalition. And you can see in it that like recycling comes before composting. So if you've got like 2 packages and one is recyclable and one is compostable, you're going to want to recycle it because it's better for the environment, for all of the resources that went into that package to be as quickly as possible converted back into something else versus getting sort of composted into the soil. So that's just an important, like recycling is just higher on the like efficacy and the environmental efficacy. A couple other things is we've interviewed a lot of composters to figure out, do we want a compostable line? And what they basically said is like, even if we accept your packaging, we don't want it. It degrades the quality of our compost. It has all these contaminants. So even if it's compostable, it has inks, it has adhesives, and that makes our soil like much harder to sell, or our compost harder to sell. And it starts to degrade the environments that it gets put on. But one thing we've realized when we talk to folks, and this is likely maybe for some of the folks on this webinar right now, is that when they're asking, should I design for compostability? They're actually asking, how do I design something that's not going to negatively contribute to ocean plastic pollution? And when I think about that, the answer is you've got to find something that's naturally biodegradable. Because composting doesn't really say much about how an item is going to behave if it found its way into litter and into the natural environment. And that's where, if really you want to design for ocean pollution and minimizing that, then looking for paper, or even, sometimes there's hemp, and there's like naturally biodegradable and oftentimes recyclable alternatives are going to fit the bill much better in terms of what you're trying to do. So as I said before, there's no one way to do sustainable packaging. And I wanted to just flash like 3 visuals of packaging options that are all designed for circularity and are all different, and they're all apparel companies, just so you can understand, like, you really can go your own way with this, even once you have a framework. The first is an apparel company that went with 100% recycled paper mailer and the tissue paper. The second is 100% recycled plastic approach. And then the last one is a box. So a real focus on like the presentation and the unboxing experience. So really encourage you to think about sustainability, but also think about your brand and what's right for your, your budget and your cost structure and things like that. Which is a good segue into my last sort of topic, presentation topic, is what about the cost? We sometimes will get the question like, can I even afford sustainable packaging? And I can talk a lot about cost and pricing, but I think a couple of things. One is there's a lot of things that will differentiate the cost of one package from the other. It is sustainability, but it's also usability and quality and features. And so this slide just shows like 3 examples of a 9x12 poly mailer, just to make this tangible. The first one is Uline. It's the most expensive option I'm showing here today. It's made with virgin materials, and it has like 1 tear strip and 1 seal strip. So it's only designed for single use. The second one is our version. It's 100% recycled, 50% post-consumer waste. And as you can see here, it's got like 2 seal strips, so somebody can get it and then use it for returns or to ship to somebody else. And then the last one is Amazon, and it's this company on Amazon that sells it like half the price of the other one. So it's obviously a lot cheaper. And it's cheaper for a bunch of reasons. One is that, yes, it has a virgin material. It's also a lot thinner. It's 40% thinner than the other 2 shown. It's 1.5 mil instead of 2.5 mil. It doesn't have a tear thing. So if somebody gets it, they sort of have to like yank it apart. So it's totally a usable poly mailer. Like if you want to shop on cost alone, it's like a perfectly great poly mailer to use that is going to get your shipment to somebody else. So the message I'm sort of saying is that there's a lot of things that drive cost, and there's always a way that you can shop on cost alone and get a cheaper option. And so that is certainly true, but you can get sustainable options that are still sort of within what I would say is like a really reasonable price point. And I think many of you likely already know this, but there's many other reasons to not just shop on cost alone. Research has shown that shoppers are looking for eco-conscious brands. They're willing to pay more, and they really believe that like what lands on their doorstep is reflective of a company's environmental values. And so I'd encourage you, as you think about cost, is obviously we all need to run a business, so you got to think about your cost and pricing appropriately. But if there is a cost differential, can you look at it as an investment in obviously your values and what you stand for as a company, but also in the brand experience that you want to give and the loyalty you want to build with your customers. So just a couple of quick closing words is, first is build a framework that you feel good about, and then try to be consistent. And what I mean by that is like, avoid like designing one thing for recyclability and then something else for compostability, and just sort of like doing it in this haphazard way, because I think it'll make your decision making really hard, and it'll send an inconsistent message to your customers. And then make sure you don't say sustainability is it. Like, really design packaging that works for your brand ethos as well as your sustainability values. And then the last one's really important, is once you've built your strategy, communicate with your customers, maybe give them a chance to understand why you made the decisions you did, and very important, help them understand what to do with the packaging at the end of its life. So those are just my prepared remarks for today. Hopefully we've got a lot of Q&A that we can go through, but thank you guys for your time.
That was incredible. I feel like you answered so many questions in such a short amount of time that I feel like we'll definitely have some follow-up. I want to acknowledge the chat. Joey, did you get your question answered, and would you like to ask anything live?
No, it got answered. Thank you. I was just something that I wanted to reference for later, but I appreciate it.
Okay. Do you want to go back to that slide?
Yeah, talk about it a little more if you want.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't see the question, but.
Oh, it was on the, oh gosh, what was it called? The 9 Planetary Boundaries. I just thought it was really
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like so glad. I love when people can geek out about this with me.
Yeah, I wanted to have it for later so I can read up more on it.
Do you actually mind going into detail what these different sections mean? I
can't, yeah, I'm not, I was gonna say, I'm not a tremendous expert on it. I just read articles about it a lot. So I'll highlight a couple just to give you guys a flavor. So for example, this biosphere integrity, the largest part of that is like biodiversity and the biodiversity loss that we're experiencing. So you can see this is because we have such species lost. That's why you're seeing this dramatic like red here, because our rate of losing species is higher than what these experts in Sweden. So I don't, these particular scientists have determined as a threshold. Land system change is this idea of like converting land from its natural use into either agriculture or development. And has like a threshold for how much land do we want to keep sort of native and natural. Freshwater use is just that, how much freshwater we're using. This one, sorry, this here is a phosphorus and nitrogen runoff, and that's the nutrient flow into our water and the excessive nutrients into our water. And that you can see is another sort of alarming area where these particular scientists think that we've superseded the threshold that we could, and how do we sort of go back from here? Then you've got ocean acidification. This is atmosphere. There's two here, novel entities and aerosol in the environment. Those are ones that are sort of new. And the novel entities is things like microplastics and plastics into the plastic pollution. Those are ones where they'll say like, we don't know yet. Like we don't know enough about these issues to understand the limits that we have. Ozone depletion is one that is actually one of our more positive stories where we're sort of like past the threshold and are slowly actually moving more closer to the center. And then climate change is the carbon emissions, so the parts per million of carbon into the atmosphere.
I actually love this graph. This is super interesting. And I've never seen it before, and I'll do some research on that.
Awesome.
I know we had another question from Zante. I included him. He's one of our vendors, and I'm curious, Zante, do you want to ask your question live, or would you like me to ask it for you? I don't know. He might be being.
Hello?
Oh, there you are. Go ahead.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, it froze and it took me out for a second. But then it said the host wants you on mute. So I was like, okay, probably wanted me.
You're good now.
So one of the questions that I had was for the mailer. I don't know why it's not letting me go on, but for the mailer, for one, and apologize again if you answered it because like my Zoom was freezing, but is it customizable, and does it ship from the US as well?
Great questions. So I'm guessing you mean like, can you custom print on the mailer?
Yeah, like, yeah, like the colors and stuff like that.
Yeah, great question. So we can, well, I'll start with, if you want like your logo or a design printed on your poly mailer, we can do that at a minimum of 500 mailers. And just the reason for that is just like the investment in the setup and the art plate. I mean, with that, you can sort of get for example, that white mailer that you saw in that slide with, a beautiful design on it, and it's a single color. So that's certainly an option you have. We do offer like a lot more customization options, but you've got to order in really high quantities to do that. So if you wanted like a full bleed multicolor, or custom sizes, or if you wanted like a flood coat of black or something like that on it, our minimums for that are 25,000. So it definitely is a lot higher to get there. But honestly, on our website, you can see just a lot of, I would say, what we call post-production, which is at those 500 minimums. People have done exquisite things with that opportunity.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I'll just say, like, I can't think of a better way to tell your brand story around sustainable packaging. So I think it's just cool for those companies that are able to take the plunge and do the 500 minimum. It's a really cool way to, I think, make your packaging tell your story.
Can I jump in and just ask a question off of that?
Yeah, of course.
Cool. So, with like the bioplastic packaging and stuff, they say it has like a lifespan. So after 9 months, a year, whatever it is, it becomes less effective or starts breaking down. Do you have that same situation with your product?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't see that at all with our product. I will say there's one product and it's our shipping labels. We've got these zero waste recyclable shipping labels that after a year, the adhesive does take a hit. But every other product of ours has a fairly lengthy lifespan.
Cool.
Thank you.
We have a question from Jessica, and I promoted her to panelist, so she wants to ask it live, but I'll ask it for her and she can jump in if she likes. Do you have a content media kit to include on everyone's personal websites about the packaging? So something that you talked about in depth was really communicating that to your customers. Is there a way that EcoEnclose helps that communication pathway?
Yeah, I love that question. We do have, we've got like a set of logos that we can offer, and like a page you can go to on our site to download all of those. That's about it. So a lot of people will say like ship sustainably, and then they'll just put our logo there with a link to us for more information. But if anybody would like to co-create something, or just have me or somebody on our team just write a couple words, we're also always happy to do that.
Yeah, I would love, this is Jessica. I would love to put like some of those graphs up there, like some informational things that were, explaining why we chose paper or why we chose plastic, or that would be rad.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, okay. I was like, I couldn't see you, but I'd be happy to like co-create that with you. And then if you're open to it, turn it into something that other people can use as well. It's the first time I've gotten to ask that level of detail. So that makes me really happy.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So we have another question from Angie Tran. Do you ship from the USA and to Canada? Because I know that she's located in Canada, and I can have her jump in and ask kind of a follow-up question to that if she'd like to.
Sure, yes, because I think, well, I was looking at your website, I see that the max is 1,000 units. I know you can do more than that, but could you, and like, instead of buying it by cases, like, do you have like special pricing, like a sheet where we can see like different volume sizes?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, sorry.
Where are you?
So Angie, are you saying like just a pricing sheet for higher volumes than like thousands of them? Is that right?
Yeah, so I was thinking like maybe like increments of like, I don't know if you already have it, if it already exists, but like 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 for non-branded and also custom as well. And then you do ship over like 20,000 units over to Canada. How do you guys do that? Is it by air? Is it by truck? Because it could be, they're very heavy.
Yes, they are. Yes, I wish that I had a price list perfect right now, but I don't. We do, if you just let us know, and you can email me, you can see my email address here. You can email me like what just general categories of items and sizes you're interested in. And we'll get back to you within 24 hours with like a really detailed price list of those particular items at different quantity breakdowns and stock, as well as various levels of customization. So we'll get that back to you quickly. And then we do ship via freight to Canada. We've got, I'd say about 5% of the customers we work with are in Canada. So we do have a fairly established way of getting product to Canada.
Do you by any chance know like what the duty is for, I guess there's duties involved, right?
There are duties involved. I don't know. It's like sort of product by product. I think our poly has a very different one than our paper one. So if you email, when you email me, you tell me what you're looking for, our team can also write back and say, okay, well, the last 4 times we shipped to Canada, here was the cost of the duties and the customs. Okay, because currently right now we have like the compostable poly mailers that we use. Mm-hmm. And like, I know like in order, because we have this question all the time from customers, like how do they, like some of them have like a compostable bin in their garden or backyard, but in some cities and also regions, they have to bring it to like a special place to compost it properly. So with your specific polymers, I was kind of reading like it's made from recycled plastic and it's recyclable, but you have to also bring it to a grocery store for it to be properly recycled. In Canada, I don't think we do that. I actually don't even think our grocery bags are actually recyclable too. So how do you recommend Canadians to recycle the poly mailers? Yeah, great question. There's actually a handful of Canadian cities that we've looked at that allow for you to curbside recycle the poly mailers. And okay. I think it's Quebec is one that I was looking at recently where it's actually on their list of accepted curbside recyclable items. So I've actually been impressed. It seems like all the research we've done in Canada is that there's just a higher amount of investment in the infrastructure at the sorting facilities to allow for curbside. But I will say that if you, whether you're in Canada or the US, exist near if you don't have access to grocery drop-offs, then you're definitely, it is a tough place. It's sort of similar. Then at that point, the best thing you could do is compost it, or perhaps encourage your customers to at least reuse it for their own shipping needs, because it does have that reusable tear strip. So maybe you can sort of go into overdrive with that message so it can have that second use case. So what exactly is your poly mailers made from? Because I know for us, it's supposed to be made from cornstarch and PPLA. So what's the difference between yours and, others? Yeah, great question. So a compostable one is made with, as you said, PLA and PBAT, and PLA is corn. And then the PBAT is a petroleum additive bizarrely, that's the petroleum part that makes it more biodegradable. So that's the compostable mailer. Ours is made with, it's 100% recycled, 50% post-consumer. So what that means is that 50% of it is made with recycled milk jugs. That's actually what's getting chipped into the packaging. And then the other 50% of it is made with post-industrial waste, which is basically the recycled bits. When film gets blown out, there's a bunch that can't get used, and that gets repelletized and put back into the film for ours. So those are the components of our poly mailers. Oh, okay, so it's made from like recyclable plastic. So that's why in Canada, I guess you can put it back in the blue bin. You can put it back in the blue bin. Yeah, and I'm sorry to give you like all this detail you probably don't need, but the reason that bags aren't recyclable in a lot of curbside bins has nothing to do with the like recyclability of the material itself. It's due to the fact that in MRFs, which are the sorting facilities, the bags come in, and because they're so flimsy, they get caught in the gears of the sorting equipment, and it shuts the sorting equipment down. And so what they found is that flexible material like that, even really, really flexible paper, started getting rejected because it couldn't go through all that sorting. So it's not about the like chemistry of the material and more just about the flimsiness. And I know in Southern California, they started accepting it curbside. As I said, in a lot of Canadian cities, they are. So MRFs are starting to make investments in equipment that allows for it to almost get pre-sorted before it goes into that gear heavy equipment. And so I think the trend is our friend. It's going to go in that direction. Perfect. Great. Oh, thank you. Great questions.
I had no idea about the plastic bags. I was always curious, like why they were being rejected. So we have another question from Elizabeth, and I believe she's in the audience. So I'm going to read it out. The adhesive for zero waste shipping labels And I believe you mentioned something on this comment. I think Emily asked this. The adhesive for zero waste shipping labels degrade a bit after a year or so. Is that mentioned in the shop listing? I feel like it should be mentioned on the shop for transparency purposes.
Yes, it's mentioned like deep, probably too deep in it. So that's a very good piece of feedback, and I will get that back to our customer service team. It's a new learning that we're having. I'll just I can give you a little bit. We've recently changed our adhesive to make it more tacky, because what we were finding is that adhering to 100% recycled paper is actually really hard because the paper fibers are shorter. And so what we were finding is that our label adhesive just wasn't sticking that well to recycled packaging. And if you're buying a zero waste label, you're probably adhering it to recycled packaging because you're focused on sustainability. And so about 6 months ago, we moved to a new adhesive, and I'll just be honest, we're still learning. So we use the shipping labels ourselves, and we were like, okay, these are working great. And then our manufacturing partner let us know that like you might find this level of degradation over time. So it is a really good piece of feedback, and we do aim for that level of transparency. So I'll share that back to the team.
Is that
Emily,
adhesive?
yeah.
Sorry, I was going to type the question, but I was like, I'll just ask it. Is that adhesive fully recyclable? So if you put it on a fully recycled mailer, you can just pop it in your recycling?
Yeah, you can. The answer to that is yes. I'll just say like adhesives are typically fall in the frame, like in the categorization of either like recycle friendly or not recycle friendly. And so or recycle compatible. And we do use a recycle compatible adhesive, which just means that it doesn't, it has a less detrimental impact during that like repulping process of paper. It doesn't create as much what they call stickies. That said, in fact, all labels are like it is very rare to find a label or a tape that renders the package unrecyclable. It's really just about how problematic, like how much of a pain is it downstream when it gets to get repulped. So we have designed it to be as little of a pain as possible in the repulping process.
Cool. And is the backing on like the roll of mailers or excuse me, like shipping labels, is that recycled or recyclable?
Yeah, so that's like the thing that we invested in here. It's like what we call the zero waste shipping label or the zero waste label, and the release liner of it, which is typically made with like virgin paper, and it's silicone coated. So it's hard, really, it's almost impossible to recycle. We've co-created like this technology that allows for it to be it's 100% recycled and curbside recyclable, and it doesn't have that silicone coating. And some of that innovation is also why we've been working through the adhesive for the last year.
Awesome.
Emily, do you want to ask your last question that you typed out? That's a question actually we've been getting a lot from vendors, this effort towards circularity. So go ahead, Emily, this is a big question.
Yeah, no, and I think somebody had kind of touched or asked it a little bit earlier, but just the idea, like, do you offer any kind of send back program for consumers?
Like, I'm so nervous to say this on this webinar because it's going to get recorded. I'm like literally in the process of making this program right now. So you're the first to know. I don't right now, but we're working on it. We've got this incredible local recycler that we work with. They're called EcoCycle, and we're located in Boulder County, and they are like such a good, a beautiful recycling partner for us to work with. And they've said, yes, if we get back our plastic film from our customers, then we can help you recycle it. But there's so many nuances and kinks to doing so. So I'll just say like, that is something that I'm super excited to have in the works. I also recognize that that's a burden to place on consumers to sort of send something back, like to take a mailer and stuff it with a bunch of plastic bags and send it back. And, I don't know what kind of take rate there's going to be on it. But I think a program like that is one. Yeah, it's one I'm really excited about. In the interim, TerraCycle is a really cool recycler in New Jersey that offers really interesting programs as well. And, those are sort of ready to go.
Cool.
I have a question in terms of when you receive as a consumer, you receive a package, whether that's, cardboard, paper, a mailer, compostable, biodegradable, whatever it is. And then there's tape on there, there's labels on there. When do you know, like, how do you recycle things and how should you separate them? I'm always really confused on whether the labels need to be taken off or not. So I don't know if you can touch on that.
Yeah, so it's very rare that they need to be taken off. So like when paper, and I'm guessing we're talking about like a box, like paper mailers, when they get repulped, there's a couple press stop, like they get repulped and then they go through this like centrifugal like force sort of place, like they just go round and round, and all the staples and the like things like that get removed, and then they go through another process where the slurry sort of separates the adhesives and the tape go to the top. So like based on weight, it sort of separates, and then they go through like a de-inking process. And so paper is actually, you know, it's a pretty advanced recycling. Like a lot of investment has been made in paper recycling. All of this is to say, it's, I think, helpful to know, like when your box is getting recycled, all of the adhesives and the non-paper parts of it are going to get landfilled. And so by you removing it, you are making this a cleaner output. So you're just like, you're making it a better material for your MRF to sell. And so I personally take it all off. It's a small thing that I can do to be like, okay, this is a higher quality output, and my MRF is gonna, if everybody did it, they can sell that bale of corrugate at a higher price than if nobody did it. So I don't know if I'm like, it's a drop in the ocean, but just a way to get yourself conscious of what's happening downstream.
And what about if you receive a virgin plastic or recycled plastic mailer with a paper label?
Yeah, such a good question. I've just been talking to Trex about this. Trex is like a company that makes composite lumber for like decks and things like that. So they're the leading recycler of plastic film in the country. There's a lot of people who do what they do, but they've actually said they would, if they have now are very okay with paper labels, because it's a fairly small contaminant that they have figured out how to use, but it is a contaminant. So again, you can do your part by cutting it out because it's just adding to the contamination. They did say other types of labels. So if you use like a foil label or something like that, that's actually pretty detrimental. So you want to cut those types of labels out.
That's so helpful. So does anyone either like on the panel as our vendors or anyone from the audience have any other questions that you'd like to ask? Saloni is a wealth of knowledge.
I've got one more.
Go ahead.
Just on the topic of recyclability, and I know it's a perfectly imperfect system, and it might be, you know, bigger than what EcoEnclose is trying to do, but like how much of recycling actually gets recycled and how much of it actually gets put back into this circular economy that we're, you know, striving for?
Yeah, that's like the best question. So paper is pretty readily recyclable. I think there was like a panic after China banned recycling. Like you had that moment of panic where a lot of MRFs had to reorient themselves. And so there was like a period of time where they didn't know what to do with their paper, but we have a wealth of like paper mills in this country. We've actually had a fairly high level of investment in new paper repulping mills in the last couple of years since the China ban went into effect. So I'd say on the paper side, you can be pretty confident that when you put something into your recycling bin, it's going back to a paper repulper. On the plastic side, you're seeing a lot less of like, you read a lot after the China ban of like people sort of stockpiling all that plastic. You're seeing a lot less of that, particularly with polyfilm. Like Trex is buying all of that polyfilm that's going, I'm not saying Trex is, but companies like Trex are buying all of that polyfilm. When it comes to plastic, it's really important to know that we're downcycling all of our polyfilm, or the vast majority of our polyfilm today, which is to say that the ideal end vision for recycling is that packaging becomes packaging over and over again. And in the polyfilm world, most of that product today is becoming, as I said, like composite lumber that goes into like park benches and tables and even like decking. And that's like, fine, it's better than it going into the landfill, but it is what they call downcycling, and it's not the ideal end. That said, technology does exist. Bag-to-bag technology exists. We just need to make better investments in it. And we need to, the plastic bag is so cheap that it's just like really hard yet to make that like economically viable. And that's sort of the future that we strive for, is like bag-to-bag recycling. And like more eternal, like, or endless recycling of plastic where it doesn't get downcycled each time. So that may be more than you wanted, but.
That's kind of a perfect segue into, I believe, what Peter is about to say. Peter, would you like to go ahead? I'll unmute you.
Okay. No, I was just say, as a compliment to everything you're doing, you know, our company is a Chilean company that has invented and patented a plastic replacement compound and products. And though it's not the solution for everything, and obviously it's just part of the, maybe will be part of the solution, but we make, and Clarissa certainly knows this, that we make, we're in the process of entering the US from Chile with a plastic product, which is not plastic. It's basically the same thing as a Tylenol capsule that you swallow and dissolves.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, it's called Solobag, and if you haven't heard of it, I think you will in the future.
I have heard of it actually.
So we just entered the market here in the U.S., and we're one of our biggest projects is replacing bubble wrap for Amazon. So this is what we're now doing the tests with Sealed Air and all the manufacturers.
Yeah.
And basically, it basically is a product that is indistinguishable from plastic, both film, fabric, and rigid, that dissolves in water. And it has SGS approvals, is FDA approved, the kind of the ingredients. So it's something that we've been doing for 2 years in Chile. It was invented by 2 Chilean engineers, and we just entered the U.S. market, and that's a very big step from Chile to the U.S. because of the demand. And I mean, it's something that goes along exactly with what you're doing, and it'll be part of an eventual solution to getting rid of plastic.
Yeah, I love that. What's it? Can you share what the feedstock is?
Yeah, it's basically made out of limestone or natural gas. It's and you produce acetylene, and that produces PVA. And
cool, yeah.
Yes, it has nothing to do. It's proven it has nothing to do with fossil fuel and nothing to do with oil. And you cannot tell the difference if you touch it. We're doing masks that dissolve in water completely. We do garbage bags, we do t-shirt bags, and it's easier to say what we don't. We do about 10 products right now because we don't have the wherewithal right now, but we can do anything that's plastic. And we're dealing with PPE specialists and the flower industry and the hotel industry. So it's an evolutionary process here. But the good thing is that it's been proven to work for 2 years in Chile. And I just want to mention one thing. In Chile, they banned single-use plastic about 2 or 3 years ago, but they also banned biodegradable, because as most places in Chile and in Latin America, you do not have composting facilities. So it's a scam. So in Chile right now, you use paper or Solobag. Those are the 2 options you have. And that's something that'll take time to sort of move on to other places. And that's what we're trying to do right now.
Cool. Well, I just wrote you down. I have a feeling we'll be in touch.
Yep.
We're all trying to get some partnerships with Solobag at the moment.
I'm sure everybody is. Yeah. Get in line.
To answer your question, Elizabeth, Solobag is the company. Peter, you could drop your link in there if you'd like.
It's solubag.cl, because Chile. You Google soluble, or it's the only product that's patented that dissolves in water.
I actually have one more question if no one else, anyone else can chime in. But my question to you, in terms of future developments, you mentioned it a little bit in your presentation, but in an ideal world, what would you like to see happening, whether it's in the recycle industry or consumer behaviors, e-commerce shipping? What would you like to see in terms of developments?
Yeah, oh God, that's such a good question. I don't have great answers, but I think there's so many things. I think the first is just I alluded to it, but right now we've got this recycling infrastructure, particularly with plastic, and there's a lot of skepticism around chemical and advanced recycling, which is a type of recycling that could theoretically allow for more an endless loop of recycling for plastic. But I am eager to see it continue to have investment and see if can we get to a place where once plastic, whatever the original source of plastic is, whether it's bio-based plastic or not bio-based plastic, that could a chemical recycling become a way that you can actually really endlessly recycle that material back into something usable. So that's something I sort of got my eye on. I think there's a lot of critics of chemical recycling, but I do have my eye on that. I think, Peter sort of alluded to it, but what is the world of feedstocks into plastic and plastic alternatives that's actually regenerative, right? Isn't that the dream where there's you can create, let's say you can create plastic out of like seaweed and kelp, and seaweed is right now, like we have too much of it in so many places. Like what if there's a world where the production of plastic from these feedstocks is actually like positive to the environment around it? Like I got my eye on that. And then, I think reusable packaging is sort of on everybody's minds. I think it's tough in e-commerce because, you guys have probably seen this, but in the grocery store world, we've learned that if you have a reusable tote, if you want to make it an environmental benefit over a plastic bag, just from a carbon and resources perspective, so not thinking about ocean pollution, you've got to use that tote 38 times. I think most of us actually use our totes many, many, many times, by more than 38 times. So it feels like really doable. But in the world of e-commerce packaging, can you trust that you can send your product out 20, 30 times and get it back each time, get that packaging back? And then what's the carbon footprint of shipping it? So I think there's got to be this intricate network and consumer behavior change that creates more reusability in packaging in general. But I'm really we've got our eye again really close on it. And if you can create reusable packaging that's also recyclable at the end of its life and maybe made with recycled content, then you can still build in that endless loop idea. So that's definitely something I'm really thinking of. And I would say right now, I think a lot about paper. I mean, I think paper has a lot of downsides, but there is a world where if we can make all of the paper in the world made sustainably, right? FSC certified virgin feedstock goes into our paper, and then we can recycle it as endlessly as possible. This paper can be recycled up to 7 times. There's sort of this world of paper and natural fibers that holds a lot of appeal, and I think can take us a long way in solving some of our more immediate problems.
I love that so much.
The world.
Final call for any questions. Speak now or forever.
I have a quick question
Go ahead.
about the mailers. So what are the lead time for the mailers? For example, if someone ordered one of the minimums, how quick is the turnaround? Maybe for just a generic one, not a not branded.
Yeah, great question. So if you order what we call in stock, so it's you're just ordering what you see on the website, we'll get them out within 1 to 2 business days, and then shipping after that. So those we get those out really quickly, or pretty quickly for us. And then if you were to custom print it, our lead times vary a little bit based on the specific mailer that you have, just based on which printer it's going to, but it's about 4 weeks to get your mailers. Okay. So if you're going to custom brand it, we gotta approve your artwork and then order the plate, and then you sort of get queued up, and it's about 4 weeks.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'll just say, if you guys are curious, and you can order free samples on our website of everything. So if you want to order the free samples of different sizes and different types of paper or plastic mailers, just to see what makes sense and sort of touch and feel it, you please do that. We love when people order samples first.
Hi, it's Angie again. So as you said that, I just ordered a bunch of samples. My question is, so if we want to customize the actual size of the poly mailers, is that doable, or it has to be?
That is. Unfortunately, it's at those 25,000 minimums, but it seems like you were interested in quantity levels in that amount. So our poly mailers, you can custom size them at 25,000, and there are various paper mailers. If that's interesting to you at all, the minimums are actually lower. It's usually about 5,000 to 10,000 to custom size those.
Okay, great. So maybe my other question is, right now we use poly mailers to ship a product, but the thing is, our product is put into a craft paper box. So sometimes it gets crushed. Unfortunately, so the customer receives it, it's a bit dented, which is not a good customer experience. So we've actually tried those craft envelopes, which I saw you also have. But our problem is that it doesn't fit up to 3 of those boxes. It gets really tight, whereas the poly mailer is more flimsy, so it has a bit more wiggle room. Do you suggest anything else we can consider on your website?
So it's poly mailers, and then it goes into a shipping box. Am I understanding the packaging strategy right?
Okay, so I'm gonna actually grab it for you right now. 1 second. So I can show you what it looks like.
Well, and I think Angie, oh yeah, perfect. Are you gonna turn I don't have your video on, Angie. I don't know.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's right. Okay, perfect.
On.
There you are.
Okay, so this is our packaging.
Oh, I love it.
So it's craft paper, and recyclable, and then they're laundry detergent sheets. So we can actually fit up to 3 of them in a poly mailer bag.
Okay.
Because we tried the craft paper before and it was kind of tight, it's like crumpling. So do you suggest, I know that you have different types on your website, but do you suggest we can try something else that maybe gives it a bit more padding?
Yeah, if you, did you look at the padded mailer at all? Like a cushioned, this is a paper-based solution, but it's a padded, it's a 100% recycled mailer with like macerated newspaper that creates cushioning. And we have that in pretty big sizes.
I think I added that to the bubble mailer, right?
There's a bubble mailer, and then we've got a paper version of that, which is a padded mailer.
Yeah, I think I added.
Yeah, so add that, and then look for, this may or may not work, just given your use case, but the gusseted paper apparel mailer, which is designed for apparel, but it may be an interesting solution for you as well.
Okay, so I guess we'll just add more.
Just add more. Yeah.
So in the case that we receive and we kind of figure out maybe one that we can test, do we just send email to your team so that you can
send an
help us?
email. My email is shown on the screen, so you can email me, and then I'll put you in touch with, you know, somebody who's actually going to do a much better job than me working with you, but I can at least guide the transition.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
We have one more question from the audience. What happened to your team's chipboards? Is there a chance they'll be sold again in the future?
Yes, that's a great question. I'll just say it was like such a slow moving product for us, and we would hold inventory for so long on it and then actually like it sort of became brittle after a while. So it just didn't make sense for us to keep holding it. I think we discontinued it about a year ago. If whoever just asked that question, if you want to email me, I can put you in touch with a couple other providers of 100% recycled chipboard that may give you what you need. And then some of our customers have moved. It's a much more expensive product, but some of them actually moved to like corrugate pads. Like we'll take corrugate and custom cut pads. So if you just need something super rigid, a corrugate pad could also do the trick. But I know I've had a lot of artists call me being really sad that we got rid of those.
I can imagine. Actually, there's one more question. They would love to see smaller sizes for the recycled flap and seal bags specifically for jewelry.
Yeah.
And
also,
the individual just said that she is an artist, which is why she's asking these questions.
yes. Do you mean we've got a 4x5 inch flap and seal, which is our smallest option right now, but it's the kind that has the suffocation warning on it, which may actually not be what a person wants because they might want the clear ones. But if that's the same person, just email me the size you're looking for. I will say flap and seals are hard for us to do in small sizes because we've got to order like, it's based on the amount of film per size. And so when you have a larger size, like we can order 50,000, you know, we can sort of like custom manufacture 50,000 for us. When you get to the really smaller sizes, it's like we have to custom manufacture like 1 million of them in order to actually make that order work. And so we just have struggled with some of the smaller sizes and the minimums and the materials that are required for those. So it's not to say that it's not on our radar. We're moving warehouses in a couple of months, and that's going to like quadruple our space and really give us an opportunity to stock products that we have been space constrained to stock before.
Well, I don't want to take too much of your evening. This has been absolutely wonderful. I think you answered far more questions than we were even prepared to ask you. So thank you so much, Saloni, for your time this evening. Thank you to all the SeaBlue vendors who joined and asked questions. We will be sending a follow-up email. And Saloni, I don't know if you want to close this out.
No, I just thank you guys. This was really enjoyable for me. You guys seem really engaged, and like the questions are all really good. And you're clearly an incredible group of entrepreneurs. So just honored to have a chance to chat with you right now.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Have a great evening.
Bye.